Hello, friends, and welcome to the September 27th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how you can engage in the process. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Engagement Director, and today's episode is brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas and Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas. So we are exactly 1 week into the Texas legislature's third special called session. The last 2 weeks, we focused on the three primary issues the legislature will be considering during this session. Last week, we talked about the anti-trans legislation that the legislature is trying to pass for a fourth time this year with a panel of faith leaders. The week before that, we talked with Eva DeLuna Castro from Every Texan with a budget blockbuster edition, talking about how the state could spend those federal dollars they've been sitting on. And last week, we hosted a Redistricting 101 webinar with state experts Bonnie Bruce and Genevieve Van Cleve. Today, we're going to be joined by Advocacy Director Josh Houston later in the program for a legislative update. But first, we want to turn our eyes today to a potentially historic piece of legislation at the federal level, talking about the Build Back Better Act, made up of both the infrastructure bill that we heard about several weeks ago and the reconciliation bill, both of which are working their way through Congress. And here for that conversation is a good friend of the program, John Johnson, a familiar name for our Lutheran listeners, as he is the Program Director for Domestic Policy with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
I love Texas Impact. I'm so glad to be back with you all. And my air conditioning just kicked on, so I'm sorry if there's some background noise. But I have to tell you, if I looked like I was hit by a bus, it was because last week it was a barn burner of a week, I have to tell you. There is so much happening right now, and it is very, very fluid. And so I want to help answer your questions as clearly as possible, but I want to talk about very quickly what's going on. So we've got two. So first of all, we really don't need to worry about the sausage making. What we need to focus on is the policy. And the policy that we're talking about, we are talking about a very big bipartisan infrastructure bill that would impact every state all across the nation. That's been passed by the Senate, and it's pending before the House. It was supposed to be voted on today, but because of the political negotiations going on, they don't have the votes for it. So they're going to wait until they have all of the pieces in place so that they can pass the infrastructure bill. Now, the other side of this is the budget reconciliation bill, which is a very convoluted congressional process that has lots of rules and lots of parliamentary, eccentricities, to be honest with you. And that is also pending before both houses. But it's really important. Earlier in the year, for the American Rescue Plan, created the child tax credit extension. That one singular policy achievement lifted almost half of children in poverty out of poverty. That child tax credit made a tremendous difference in the lives of people all across this country. And we want to make that permanent. In the Build Back Better plan, in this budget reconciliation plan that the House has put forward, there's rental assistance, which we know housing is such a tremendous issue right now. There's Medicaid expansion. there's child nutrition, there's senior nutrition, there are family wellness, there's paid parental leave. There are so many opportunities to address the working family and hungry people all across this country. We will never see this. We will not likely see this opportunity again. And it is not hyperbole on my part to say that in the 20 years that I have been doing faith-based advocacy, and I've worked for the Episcopal Church and I've worked for the ELCA, this is one of the most important pieces of legislation that I've ever worked on in my career. And so if you have friends in Arizona or West Virginia, I would say reach out to them. But I'll put it in the chat. I think I can put it in the chat. But I want to send a link. Bishop Elizabeth Eaton, who is the presiding bishop of the ELCA, and Bishop Michael Curry, who is the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, literally did a video last week, and I'll put that in the chat. But they came to Washington, and they met at the White House. Friends, I need you to understand, no meetings in person are happening at the White House. And I was invited to a meeting with Congressman Clyburn and a number of other faith leaders at the Capitol. There are no meetings happening in person at the Capitol. This was the most important thing I've done all year, and probably in the time that I've been with the LCA. So I'm going to stop. Maybe I can answer some questions, but I need you to know that this is a pivotal week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. It is a really important time right now.
So I'm going to give you a second to put that in the chat. And I love the way you laid that out, because if we look at the news stories that are coming out about this, I've listened to several podcasts, they spend so much time talking about how the sausage is made and the price tag and all of those things. But you talked about the priorities in this bill. And I think that's important, because it's more than a number. It's more than, a political victory. We have the opportunity, or Congress has the opportunity to change lives with this legislation. So can you say a few more words about the role that the faith community is playing in pushing for these important priorities? I know you spoke about the bishops in your meeting, but are there any other actions by people of faith to push for these priorities?
So it's interesting because, we have been working on a lot of these priorities for decades. And it's like all of that work has finally come into one package. I've done a lot of meetings on the Hill, I've got to tell you. And on both sides, I was a Senate staffer for 5 years, and I've been on the other side of the table. The nicest thing, or the best thing I heard last week, was listening to the chairman of the Budget Committee, the House, Congressman Yarmuth, when he said, "We are finally asking the right questions in the right order." That to me was just a huge sea change. We are talking about what do we need, not what will it cost. Because at the end of the day, we are the richest nation on the planet, and we can actually make everything that we need for families and children across this country to succeed happen. And so hearing from a member of Congress in a very influential position talk about we're asking the right questions, we're talking about priorities, was really, it's what you work for all the time. And so I think that is really important. We would not have been invited into that space if people of faith didn't have such a consequential impact on policymakers. I have preached about advocacy for so long. And what I can tell you is that we're doing the work of the gospel. This is what it means. Political winds change. Our gospel mandate does not. And this is the moment that we can help our neighbors all across the country in one giant opportunity. So the phone number is 202-224-3121. Call your senators. Tell them that a Build Back Better plan has to happen.
And call your friends in Arizona and West Virginia.
Yes, absolutely.
So, John, you've got me fired up. I'm ready to make telephone calls this afternoon.
Great.
So, is it enough to just give that one or two sentences you just gave us, or is there any other messaging we should be using and talking with our senators, members of Congress?
I think it's we've got to do something, and I think what the message is, and it works for Republicans and Democrats. We have a historic opportunity to help families and children. We should take it.
I agree. We should take it. I want to dig into the weeds a little bit on one because because you were so kind to meet with a group of faith leaders last week to help them prepare for some meetings with members of Congress. But in talking with our members and going through the priorities that are in the bill, the one that really stood out to them was the Medicaid expansion piece. Can you explain to our listeners what that would allow for states who haven't extended Medicaid like Texas?
2.2 million people. 2.2 million people would have access to health care that they don't have right now. Medicaid expansion. So Medicaid is one of the most comprehensive health care measures that exist in the United States. You can get into a lot of the weeds and arguments about health care. I don't have a better example about the need for healthcare than the past 18 months. We need doctors. We need nurses. We need senior living centers. We need healthcare in the United States. It is so fundamental to like waking up in the morning. And the states that have not expanded Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act are denying 2.2 million people in our neighbors, our friends, the people that we go to church with. 2.2 million people could have access to healthcare right now. Good quality healthcare. And I hate when people throw around the moral argument. This is a moral argument, it's a moral situation. How do we say you can have healthcare, but you can't? It's just fundamentally unchristian, and it denies the basic principle of love your neighbor as yourself. 2.2 million people could have access to healthcare.
And we all know one of those people. I had a conversation in church yesterday with a young person who has a medical condition who I think should qualify for Medicaid and isn't able to receive it in Texas. And so, we've had this opportunity for years. We all know one of those 2.2 million people, and their stories are heartbreaking.
Or we see them. I live in Washington, D.C. I pass Mr. Larry, who lives, so I live right next to I-395, which is a highway that goes through Washington, D.C. And there's Mr. Larry, a man that lives under that bridge. I pass him all the time and I say hello. He could have that health care, but he can have that health care because it's the District of Columbia. But there are people that are living in bridges in Texas that can't.
So I hope this is a layup. I just got a question from online. Where can do you have somewhere that people can go to find out what is in this bill, especially folks of faith who are interested in some of the priorities you're mentioning?
Sure. So I am aware of the meeting last week that so here's the way it will work. So the House has published, and I've still not gotten to it yet, has just published their version of the budget reconciliation bill. It's now public. I will find a link and send it your way. It will be the high watermark of the legislation. While we want to talk about policy, there are some members in Congress that are talking about numbers. So what that means is that whatever the House puts forward, I think senators will want to scale back. There are a lot of rumors out there. I would not even waste time in getting into those weeds. What I would focus on is we care about child tax credits. We want to make them permanent. We care about housing. We care about Medicaid expansion. We care about paid leave. We care about summer meals for children. We care about senior nutrition. This is a once in a career opportunity for all of us to really change social policy in the United States.
All right. I'll give you a chance. We'll see if any other questions come in. But for now, John, any closing thoughts or shameless plugs?
Well, so a couple of things. I'd say, the ELCA.org/advocacy is a great place to find information. Again, the Capitol switchboard is 202-321. I'm sorry. No. 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. Just ask for your senator, and say thank you, operator, because they're amazing. And just every call that you make makes a difference. It really does. Light up the switchboard. Light it up. This is our time. This is a generational opportunity. So.
Amen. You just reminded me when you stopped in the middle of giving me a telephone number. I was doing a radio interview one time and gave the wrong telephone number. Project you're working on, and that was not well received. It was it was a number that was in my head. It was somebody else's, and they let me know that they were getting some telephone calls. Anyway,
I've actually done the same thing.
Yeah. So I'm glad you caught yourself. Anything else before we go, John?
No, I just have to tell you, Texas is an amazing state. It really is a reflection of our country, and your voices absolutely make a difference. So thank you so much for all you do, and just know how much we're all in this together. And we are the government. We are the people. The people are the government, and don't look at policymakers as something other than our neighbor. We have a right to be influential in our own selves. So it's really important, I think, that we take the moment, this opportunity, and seize it.
Well, John, I really do appreciate the time, and I love those noises. I hope they're notifications telling you that Congress is passing something right now or something. But
yeah, people are calling me as we speak, and I chose the most kind notification I could possibly find on the iPhone. So there we are.
Nice. We really do appreciate the time, and we are always relying on you and our other DC partners to keep us up to date on what's going on in DC. And I think you're right. This has the potential to be a historic couple of weeks, and I really do hope that listeners and Texans of Faith are engaging to help these important bills across the finish line. So
and because this is so important, I'll even give you my email. It's John, John Johnson, Johnson at elca.org.
Right. Light up your members of Congress and
call them all.
All right. Well, thanks again for the time. We'll look forward to talking again soon. Maybe after this.
Be well. Thank you. I'm jumping off. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. Next, we will welcome to the program our Advocacy Director, Josh Houston. Josh, we are 1 week into the third called special session. We've talked more this year than I think we would have expected in January. So I think for many of us, we talked thinking that this third session would start out in a hurry. And we're still kind of waiting, right? I think last week we had the anti-trans bill that we talked about last week passed in a hurry, but otherwise it's been kind of wait and see on the maps. The Senate map came out, I think, last week. The congressional map came out a few minutes ago, so I don't imagine we'll talk about that. But what's happening? What are you seeing? What should we be watching for?
Yeah, I mean, so for the legislators, it's not slow. They are very focused on. Well, they're very focused on themselves and the districts that they're going to be running in, frankly. And so redistricting is going to suck all the oxygen out of the room. There are several items on the call. For the most part, there have not been substantial hearings on those policy areas. In fact, I just updated the boss about where we were at on the COVID relief funds being appropriated. And the answer is there's a Senate bill, there's not a House bill yet, and the Senate bill has not had a hearing yet. So that it is from a policy standpoint, they are really fixated on redistricting and not substantive policy. The big exception to that, I mean, with redistricting, they are really ready to go home, to be done with special sessions. They want to get into campaign season. And of course, in Texas, it's not the November election that they're worried about. 95% of them, in fact, they're coming through redistricting, so it's even a higher percentage this time around. More than 95% of the legislators are going to be much more worried about this upcoming primary, whether it be in March or whether it be at a later date. That date will be determined whenever they pass those redistricting maps. They are incentivized to get it done and get it done this time if they can. They're incentivized to because they really don't want to move the March primary. Moving the primary has the effect of decreasing turnout. And when you have a moving date on a primary and unpredictable turnout, you have a high level of unpredictability in the outcome of that election because you just don't know which voters will show up. And that favors the challengers over the incumbents. So with all of them being incumbents, they're highly incentivized to try to get it done and get it done this time. So for the most part, legislators are focused on getting the maps done. And that is a very, it's the most volatile thing they'll do. And they're already extremely mad at one another, not just on a party line, but within the parties and just the interpersonal relationships have really broken down after this many special sessions where they had some really contentious issues that included the quorum break. Where everybody is just not really wanting to be around everybody else at this moment. That said, the Senate has passed Senate Bill 3, which is the anti-transports bill. They had a hearing and passed it all last week, the way the Senate does in a hurry. Once again, we will probably be issuing an action alert for you to call your House member once it is clear to us which committee that bill will go to when it is officially referred. As it's not been referred yet, that may very well happen today. Once we know where it goes to, we will once again ask you to call the House. It is kind of a razor thin margin for stopping it. The way it's been for the last, what is this? This is the third special session. So the last 3 times, counting the regular session, that it's been stopped. It's been narrowly stopped. But that the place to stop it is the House. And I know people are very fatigued at making these calls, and they've probably heard from you before. Yes, do it again. Here's why. We don't know what those district lines will look at, but it is true that no matter what they look at, we are probably one primary away from really being done fighting about another human being's equal status with regard to sexual orientation. Why do I say that? I mean, largely there's agreement in the Democratic Party, almost overwhelmingly. And in the Republican Party, if you look at public opinion polling, we are extremely close for there being a critical mass of people who say, why are we discriminating against LGBT folks? The white evangelical, frankly, and I'm calling them out because that's what the public opinion polling shows, the white evangelical Protestants that vote in Republican primary are a declining number. And so public opinion polling is at one place where the voters are at, has not yet caught up to public opinion polling. That always happens. There's always a lag between those two things. But we are getting ever closer for there being a openly pro-equality LGBT Republican that is willing to be brave and willing to run on that, or at least not run away from it, and prevail. And when that happens, when there is an openly pro-LGBT Republican that runs on it and prevails, at least more than one or two, once it happens once or twice, I think we'll be done with this using children as a political football.
Thanks, Josh. And if you want to hear people go even stronger, you can listen to our panel of faith leaders last week who did not mince words in talking about that particular legislation. And
I don't mean to be weak on it. I want to be crystal clear about the way forward to get out of this nonsense.
Absolutely. Was not suggesting you were weak. They were just super.
No.
So talk us through this week. I know you mentioned on the staff call this morning, there's a lot going on this week, even if we don't have a schedule to hear bills yet. So what are we watching this week?
Yeah, we just got off our staff meeting and they all got scheduled pretty quickly. In special sessions, things move fast. And even when it doesn't pertain to legislation, we have several hearings coming up. It seems like every committee is wanting to have a discussion about the situation at the Texas-Mexico border. There's good reason for that. One, there's an actual humanitarian crisis occurring at the Texas-Mexico border. 2, they tripled the appropriation for the Texas-Mexico border for border security during the last special session. So with a triple appropriation, the legislative branch feels the need to at least appear like they are overseeing that money. I don't mean to be condescending towards the legislative branch, but I say appear like because for the most part, kind of the story here as of late is if you like executive power and expansive executive powers, then you'll love what's going on in the Texas legislature. Because this is not just the Texas-Mexico border, but on any number of issues we're about to talk about, where the executive branch has taken it upon itself to just handle it and not go through the legislative branch. And the legislative branch has not shown a will to claw back or at least rein in those executive actions. So there's a couple of hearings coming up. As we speak, there's a hearing in the House Corrections Committee, which of course has jurisdiction over border issues because we have expanded. We have if you decommission a facility but then reopen it, I guess you just reopen it. I was trying to think of a big fancy word, but I think they're reopening through 1, but potentially 3 decommissioned prisons that were closed and being reopened by private prison contractors. There's a story that broke today that Texas is not actually respecting our own constitutional requirements to not hold people indefinitely without trial. That bears watching. as we are holding migrants potentially without trial on state charges, which is different than felony charges. There's a lot that deserves to be monitored down there. The question is the legislative branch monitoring it effectively and even asking the right questions, or are they using it to politically grandstand? And that's what we're going to be watching for Monday. There was a hearing last week. There's a hearing today. There's going to be a hearing Wednesday in another committee having to do with the border operations. And then tomorrow, changing subjects from the border, but to the electric grid. We all remember sitting in the cold for several days with the lights out and no power, where we embarrassed ourselves on a national stage not being able to handle a snowstorm. With regard to the fixes that may or may not be occurring, there is a hearing of the Senate Business and Commerce Committee tomorrow on what's going on over at the Public Utility Commission. There's no bill, there's no legislation. It's an oversight hearing by all appearances because the reforms that may or may not be occurring, and I'm hedging on that because it's unclear exactly what they're going to do and whether it'll be effective or not. But the discussions, I guess I should say, that are happening at the Public Utility Commission are happening in the executive branch and the executive branch only, where they have at least two different, they call them dockets over there, but they're two different items where they're looking at doing by rulemaking and executive fiat reforms that are hopefully within their statutory authority to reform the electric grid. That's an item that has not been added to any of the special session agendas for the legislature to look at. It's an item that's being done within existing laws and existing rules about what does our market look like, what does the design of our market look like, kind of big questions that are being done in the executive branch only about how are we fixing our electric market going forward, and the open question, what are they going to do, is the big one, and then will that actually be effective, which I think is the thing that everybody cares about. We think certainly, because politicians are politicians, there will be a declaration of victory at some point around the election. I assume the primary election. Whether it's an actual victory or not to reform the electric grid remains to be seen.
So John gave us a call to action to call our members of Congress, particularly our senators and our friends in Arizona and West Virginia, to make telephone calls about the Build Back Better Act. Maybe the third time I say that, I'll get it all out in one try. You've mentioned that we'll be making some telephone calls likely later this week to oppose the anti-trans sports bill. Anything else that we should be watching this week? Anything we should be doing?
Yeah, you should absolutely pay attention to the election audit that's occurring. So some of you will remember, maybe you remember, I'm not even sure if we had time to talk about it, in the waning days of the second special session, so last month. We talked about a Senate bill, I think it was 97. It was a high number. It got filed real late. The Senate filed it, had a hearing, and passed it. Kind of in, I think, don't hold me to the exact number of hours, but it was like a 48-hour window. It was super quick. And the whole thing is to try to get the governor to put it on the call for the third special session. This bill had to do with having a forensic audit of our election. Now, I want to pause. Audits sound fine. They normally are fine. Turns out we do it anyway. It's called a canvass, but it is an audit where we spot check after every single election. We canvass the vote. It's a part of the process. Whenever the results are announced on election night, they are unofficial results. You'll see that little asterisk at the bottom of the news. And you'll see it, at the Secretary of State's office too, when they post what they've been reported, because they canvass the vote. The canvass takes a couple weeks actually, where they go back and canvass the votes as a matter of routine procedure. Nevertheless, we're now doing these things called forensic audits because it's become a political football, because the former president of the United States just can't let it go. And it's happening in Arizona. It's happening. There's pushes for it in Florida, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania. And here we are in Texas having the results of our election questioned. When the Senate did that in the waning days of the second special, the governor made an announcement that it would be added to the call of a third special session. It was not on the initial call of the third special session, which was interesting. And then there were subsequent items that were announced that the governor added to the call. Property taxes being one item that was added, I guess about a week ago now. So when that addition to the call was made and the election audit bill was not on it, that then prompted the former president at some event, perhaps a rally, I'm not sure exactly what event it was, but at an event, it then prompted former President Trump to say that Governor Abbott should add it to the call. And within a matter of hours, the governor then announced that the Secretary of State would be doing it and just doing it by executive fiat for 4 counties. Tarrant, Dallas, Collin, and Harris. So 3 in the DFW area. 3 of them being, well, Tarrant's kind of a swing district. Collin is increasingly a swing district, but still solidly Republican. And then Dallas and Harris are, of course, Democratic strongholds. All of them are urban, I think, is one of the key things to note about that. Here's the problem. I mean, I already mentioned that we do audits. They're called canvassing the votes. But these Arizona-style audits are problematic for 2 really big reasons. In Arizona, they let a private contractor do the audits. That's problem number 1. So that's a thing to watch for in Texas. I'm not saying it's happening in Texas yet. It's a thing we need to watch for very closely. Who's doing the audits? Is it the Secretary of State's office, government employees, or does the Secretary of State contract with a private third party? And who is that third party? Because in Arizona, the contractor had ties to the Team Trump. The big second thing is who pays for it. And in this case, it ought to be the taxpayer that pays for it. Because in Arizona, it was private money that had ties to Trump that then paid for the contractor to do the audit. Those are 2 big things to watch for in Texas that we will be watching for going forward with regard to these audits. And then, of course, you can make your own political conclusions about our governor's willingness to stand up when his own Secretary of State said our election was secure and successful. You've seen that line a lot in the press because they said it under oath in a committee hearing 9 months ago now, and I heard him say it. And many speculate that that's what cost the Secretary of State, Ruth Hughes, her job, because she resigned, and we do not have an acting. We have an acting. We do not have a permanent Secretary of State at this moment, and it's largely thought that she was forced out for being off message. So continue to watch that space. Continue to watch the politics involved in this, and be vigilant in how this might undermine confidence in our democracy.
It's unreal how the waves just keep coming on this front, right?
Yeah, I mean, you say it enough and it becomes true, and sure enough, when you look at public opinion polling, the lies are sticking, at least with some subset of voters in one particular party.
So just to kind of go back to where we started. So we have a draft Senate map that's out. We have a congressional map that came out this morning.
Hours ago.
Yeah. The Senate's had hearings on their map. Any guess when the House one might come out?
Last I heard, it would be sometime this week. I think if you just kind of look at the timeline necessary, that makes sense. Sometime in the next week. But no, I do not know for sure when the House ones will come out. But man, it is interesting to watch.
Right. Thank you, Josh Houston. Any closing thoughts for today?
No.
I've worn them out. All right. Well, Josh, thanks for the work you're doing every day. Thanks for keeping us up to date, up to speed. And friends, thank you for tuning in today. And thanks in advance for the work you're going to do on these important priorities. If you have made it with us this long, please make sure that you leave a rating or review in your favorite podcast feed. We like to see your reviews that have the highest rating. Josh, we want high or low ratings?
We always want high, right?
We want high ratings. That's right. I was making sure he's still paying attention. So we love to see your reviews, so leave those. We might read it on air. And remember to keep an eye on Texas Impact social media for upcoming announcements, or you can email me at scott@texasimpact.org with questions. And finally, remember that if you appreciate Texas Impact and the Weekly Witness community, please make sure that you and your congregations are members by going to texasimpact.org/join. Friends, there's a lot going on in the policy world right now. These are unprecedented times with many things that will move in the next week or two that could have long-lasting ramifications. So the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.